Okay, we have spent the last many messages in a series on the Old Testament prophets, a series designed to give a deeper understanding, not necessarily of the content. And that's what I tried to say at the get-go. This is not exhaustive for the content, but the whole idea is to paint the picture of the personalities of these people, their courage, their wisdom, their faith, how God used them in His divine plan. So there's no accidental calling, and everything had a purpose. I've already said that the prophets are way more than dreamers and visionaries, or people displaying signs or speaking in a parable, but they obviously were used as vessels to communicate. And we see, if you start at the beginning, we see it's just a terrible decline of the people. It starts at the beginning. It's not like they started out great and everything was good. It starts way back there. And God was gracious enough to keep giving the message of turn back to God, understanding human frailty and the way our nature, the bent in our nature, which is opposite and away from God. So probably the most important thing that we have looked at is that up until a certain point, we had the prophets that came way before the exile was ever spoken of, the prophets of exile. We'll be looking at the post-exilic prophets today, at least one, hopefully, not more than one, because I don't want to rush through it. But the big thing that I'm asking you to look at, there's an undergirding here. One is to understand that in today's, I keep using this because it's the best way to describe it, in today's revisionist history, as people peddle the history of the people that are referred to in this book, it must be understood that multiple times we have read the covenant was broken. God didn't break the covenant, the people did. And you just have to, I'm sorry to say it like this, but you have to read what's there, not what you want it to say. So God there back in Deuteronomy said, here's a chapter that tells you about if you're obedient, and a chapter that tells you about disobedience and the consequences that fall on either side, good or bad. So God spelled out way back there in advance the consequences of disobedience. Now, why would God do that at the very beginning if there wasn't a capacity to know that that bent nature for sin is innately in each and every single one of us? Not as though somebody's born and they're born with goodness. And I know there's a bunch of people out there that'll argue that, but that's what this book is about. It says no one, not one, is considered righteous, but our own righteousness is as filthy rags, and there's only one righteous one who imputes his righteousness unto us for simply our faith in him. That's all. So when we talk about reading this aright, it should be understood that there are some very challenging messages in here, and they're challenging because they go against the narrative that is preached and peddled. And I get, by the way, I get your messages. Some people are saying to me, I'm struggling because I was reading this commentary, I was reading this author, and they're saying something completely different. I'm urging you to do one thing. I'm urging you to use common sense. It really goes a long way. Almost all of my commentaries that I use they're now considered, even my newest commentary is probably at least 20 years old. They all have the same flaw. Linguistically, if you are not able to read Hebrew or Greek, you should not argue with me. And I'm not saying that I'm a perfect scholar. I have my own mistakes and flaws and issues. But please, for the love of God, quit making your argument on the English language. It's very young. It is imprecise. And you might say, well, what point are you trying to make? Well, I'm going to touch on it just briefly. There are commentaries, I think I have most of them, that refer to the people, for example, that are in Babylonian captivity. The reference is that they are Jews. And you might go, oh, wow, where are you going to go with this? I'm going to tell you linguistically, that's where I'm going to go. The nomenclature, that's an English term. It didn't exist when the King James were penning this and translating it, doing their version. That word was being used in the day, the 1600s. But in the day of Haggai and Nehemiah and Ezra and even Esther. If you're reading English, you're going to read the book of Esther. It has lots of references to Jews. The problem is, I really urge you, if you can, to look it up. Brown Driver Brig, maybe? The tool, the Hebrew tool that can help you look that up to show you that even the word describing Mordecai as a Jew in Hebrew is simply an adjective identifying a man who came from a territory. There was no terminology except that if you lived in the southern kingdom and were part of Judah, then you were a Judahite. This is where I tell people, do your homework. Read English etymology will lead you down a trail to reveal to you that a lot of our arguments we have in the English language are just stupid and they fall flat because we have words that didn't even exist back in that day. So what we have is a people heralding from a place, and they will be identified. Go this way. Jesus of Nazareth. Do you think that's his last name, of Nazareth? It's where he's from. Mary Magdalene was not Mary Magdalene proper name, but Mary of Magdala. That's how people were identified. So if you're not going to use the same pathway to identify the way the Bible speaks to us, then you are going to be in error. Now, there's a bunch of people out there that are going to be really angry with what I just said, but I am teaching what is here, not what I want it to say. And that's been the conflation of a lot of these scholars. And because they are in a commentary, in a large volume of books that sit on a shelf that look very scholarly, we make certain assumptions. Those scholars can't be wrong. But what if all of those scholars all drank from the same pool? Because they all did. Very little critical thinking, very little application to just what I just said. So I'm telling you, there's a lot of things that will come out of this series relating to the land, relating to the people, and it's all applicable to today. And I don't necessarily mean the lessons. Oh, the lessons are brilliant. They tell us that in spite of God's grace and in spite of God's mercy, these people still decided to turn their back on God over and over and over and over and over again. And God spared the southern kingdom. Why? Because God's house was there, where God's presence would abide. He spared the people, thinking if he got them out of the land, and the land basically laid fallow for 70 years, a new generation would be born, and maybe some of those that were born in captivity would come back, and they would start over. But it didn't necessarily happen that way. Oh, they did come back. So it's important when I say there's a lot here that we're not looking for the exhaustive component to understand a book. We're looking at bigger pictures to understand why, for example, did God give all these different messages. Some of them are messages, some of them are visions. Some of them, for example, Ezekiel, I didn't take the time to talk about the visions Ezekiel saw. Some of them are way out there, but they're tied into the book elsewhere, and they have purpose. So the premise for a lot of these messages is actually to show you there is a good reason to study the historical backdrop, to understand the societal issues, and also to read it in context. So, for example, I just gave you an example of Jesus of Nazareth, Mary Magdalene. The same thing will apply here. So for those of you who are saying, I'm reading a commentary and it's referring to this and it's saying that, you know what? I've always said this. Go check me out. Check out. I have no problem with anything that I say. Go, if you want to have your own opinion, that's between you and God. I'm not telling you, you must believe exactly what I believe every single step of the way. I'm putting the information out there. Don't hate the messenger. And then if you disagree, take it upon yourself to find several different sources, good, reliable as can be, to start building your other theories or your other doctrine. But the ideas that have been floated by me are actually very infuriating because they suggest that English should be the determining factor on the nomenclature and how we understand. But I'm sorry, the version, any English version, starting with Wycliffe's version and going all the way forward to the latest, whatever version that is, they will all have the same problem. We are not Semitic in our tongue, especially for Hebrew and Aramaic, so there are certain ways that things are written that cannot be replicated within our language frame. And whether you want to talk about the ambiguity of the Hebrew language or not, to understand it in context, the whole Bible in context, lets you look at current events today with great clarity and not with, I'm sorry, the wave of misinformation that's being peddled, not just through politics, but through the Church of Jesus Christ, if you can imagine that. I listened to 2 or 3 different pastors this last week say things that are completely contradictory to the Word of God. And yet, and this is a very large congregation, we're talking about 50,000 plus people in attendance. Good job, Satan. Okay, so with all that being said, what I'm doing for a purpose.
Come into this house, magnify the Lord, lift up holy hands, our hearts in one accord, worship and bow down before Him.